We're going to get going now. How's everybody? Everyone good? Good. So this is we're really 12:30. The Hollywood Films and TV Magic, perfecting content, concept, and concept modeling. But we're also going to talk about the future of entertainment, and you have tremendous guests here to walk through a little bit of what we do in the industry, especially with Charles Seegers to my left. He's CEO of Ovation TV. He's also a digital strategy advisor at DreamWorks. And Charles, I've always said this about him, but he's one of the smartest guys in Hollywood. He's been behind the scenes for a lot of stuff. He's also a great guy too, humble. And he was there at Fine Living, for example, when that was launching, and he was launching a new integrated strategy for them that would marry TV with digital and publications at that time. And so he's actually been on the forefront, helped advise on changes and strategies behind pop.com. And he's now really at the forefront with DreamWorks in terms of their strategy on the digital front. So I want him to actually explain his background a little bit and leave it to him. And then to his left is Nick Reed, who, as you know, yay, Nick. As you know, he's an Oscar winner.
Do you bring your Oscar and just put it right?
Only when it comes down to decision time.
Okay, good work.
Negotiating tool, right? So Nick is tremendous in terms of content, and looking at that, I want to, get him a background. How many of you are sort of on the creative end, are interested in that side? Great. Raise it a little bit higher so I can get a sense. Good.
How many people are here because they wanted a day off?
Yeah.
So I'm going to let Nick, go into his background, but he comes from long-standing also with entertainment and being an agent, and also through that work, involvement in all levels of film, and a tremendous producer. And again, I don't know if you saw the documentary, but the whole thing about that documentary, Lady in Number 9, it is beautiful. It's heartfelt, and you heard the writers, I think, before, that the core of this business is putting heart into story, right? And he has that skill, and so that's we want to learn about that. And then my name's Winston Perez, and I do concept modeling. And I don't know how many of you have heard about what I do or know what concept modeling is? Anybody? Yeah. So it's relatively new, but I think for writers and creative, you might find it interesting. I work with studio films, also studio technologies, and I deconstruct the concepts underneath it. But I'm going to give you an example of that right away. And were any of you here in the spring? Did you see what we started with last time? Jaws and things like that? Do you mind would you like me to repeat that? Because it kind of helps people get into the mood. Okay. So if we look, how many of you know this one? Oh, so maybe, let's wait till okay, great. So I want this side of the room to do a heartbeat. Ba-bum. Ba-bum, ba-bum, but really loud. Ba-bum. Now this side of the room, I'd love you to do the theme from Jaws. Da-dun, 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 da-dun. Let's go. Ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum. So as you're doing that, I want you to explain, give me 1 second to explain, why does that music, why do we remember that music? How many people here know that song, know that music? How many? Almost the entire world. Right, recognizes that. And that's a hint that there's concept in it. And what I mean by concept is this essence, much deeper than just the music itself or the notes, right? And Beethoven did this, like with the Pastoral. It's not just music. He was trying to express the essence of what it was to be out in the Vienna woods, to see the valleys, and to watch a creek, something running down that. So I want to sort of reveal to you the secret and the concept underneath that music that makes it work. The first thing, as you're going to hear, is that it's based on a human heartbeat, right? So if you listen to that, you'll see that rhythm there. The second thing is, why don't we try that right now? Ready? Ba-bum, ba-bum, dun 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 bum 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 bum. Okay. Now the whole thing about the beat, by the way, is that it's not scared, right? Dun 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 dun. This is not something who's sitting around relaxing, watching the TV on the couch. That is something that's coming at you, right? With intention. And so what they do to emphasize that, if you do it again, I'm going to add that third layer of the music. So let's do. Let's go, everyone here. They'll go, do-do-do, do-do-do, right? So when you hear that, what it's saying is there's a heartbeat, something alive that's coming at you, but it's not. It's intentional. It's not just relaxed. And the third thing, as you hear that, is the most important concept that makes it work. Because that beat is slightly different, it's actually the opposite of a heartbeat. It's telling you, by listening to it, that whatever's coming at you is not human. And that's what makes it work, right? That's what makes us fear. And what we do at that concept level is look at the models, look at the essence of what things are that's going to connect it to the audience. So we use it for marketing, but we use it to tighten scripts and things like that. And I wanted to give you another simple, practical example from the real world. And so I just want to show you, we're going to talk about the future, right? But one of the keys to the future is it's here today. It's always here today if you know how to look at it. So I want to show, how many people know what this is? So obvious, right? And watch, how many people know what this is? So what is this? Excuse me? Somebody said iPhone, right? iPhone, right? So iPhone, it's really not an iPhone when you look at it from a marketing point of view. And what I'm going to just say is so obvious, right? This is really not this. And the companies that went to create a phone like these, right, are out of business or they have a smaller market. What they did here, intuitively and with genius, is they stopped making a phone and they made a computer that has an app that is a phone. So when you put it on and you look at all the apps, one of them is a telephone. And that's a conceptual shift. Right? That's what you're looking for. That's the shift in JAWS that, oh, that's a heartbeat, but it's not human, right? And if you want to know the future, if you want to look at it, you can see it right here on this table in the past, right? Remember that when you had your phone, you'd have it on a desk, right? And it'd be a little corner of perhaps in your house. What else would you have around that phone? Somebody tell me up here, what would you see around your phone in the 60s? So yellow pages, there you go. So suddenly, obviously.
Nick, you were alive in the 60s. What was by your phone?
Yeah.
I couldn't afford a phone in the 60s.
But guess what? You'd also have, right, your personal phone, right, your database. And do you remember when they brought out the phones at first? They didn't have databases in them. So when we look at things, you look at the whole thing. You look at what the essence of what a telephone is. You know, and you see in this version, they start to put their database there. You see in this, you see the internet, right? And do you remember that the yellow pages used to have let your what? Why do you remember that? How many people remember let your fingers do the walking? Well, once again, there's a deep concept there. Once again, that translates into a company that is probably one of the most dominant companies in the world that we all touch every day. But the concept is the same. Because what fingers used to do was walk through the yellow pages, right? And that's what Google is. Conceptually, that's what Google is. There's all this information, all these companies, but you needed the fingers to help you do that. So if you could deconstruct that, you could almost see your iPad here, right? The computer is what you put these things on. And you always have to add one little thing, which is your portable computer. I mean, how you take photographs. Try to stick that in there today. And there's not much chance of that. But the ideas were always there. So what we want to do is talk about content. What we want to do is talk about the future. What we want to do is also learn how to dig deeper. You know, you have talent here that intuitively masters at story, masters at content. And we all want to learn what they do. And part of that is intuition, but intuition is our way of touching concept. I've got a feeling that we should put a database here. And sure enough, that connects, right? We touch the material world with our hands. We touch the intuitive world, the core of script writing, with gut, intuition. I know this is the heart of this story. This is the heart of a character. So with that, I'm going to rest for a second while. I would love if, Charles, you tell a little bit about your background, how you got into the industry, and what
I
made
can't
you-
hold a job. Let's start as a headline there. I was alive when that telephone existed. I still have one in my house because it's the only thing that I can make a voice call on in Century City. So shame on Verizon and shame on Apple for making it not frictionless for me in certain parts of the country. I started out very early on writing documentaries, segment producing. I see somebody in the audience who, Peter Facer over there, say hi. Peter, it's like 25 years, right? Just about. We started at a channel called Movie Time Channel together, which we morphed into E! Entertainment Television. Generally, I've always been on the content creation side. I've worked, obviously, now in digital media, but also wrote and created the National Treasure movies, working on a third, which I'm happy to talk about today because I think it goes to what concept modeling's core is and what the future looks like on different platforms. But generally just always in content creation. And I just want to tell everybody that being a content creator today couldn't be any more exciting. There are so many platforms out there hungry for content. The problem is they don't pay a lot of money. And that's always the hardest part of it. But these telephones, these mini computers, if you have ever been to Korea or Japan, you will see they're about probably 15 years ahead, I think, in content consumption. You know, mobile games, which we're just really, truly getting started here in the US on, they've been, you know, chaptered in just about every Asian country. They're sold in bulk in every Asian country. You can buy SVOD subscriptions for mobile games. And I think you're going to see all that being sort of exported and imported into the United States as the MVPDs start to break up. So my background is trying to find a place in that world. I think it's going to be hard in regards to financing, but I think as content creators and storytellers, the opportunity and the technologies that we have to play with today are really going to engage consumers.
Do we knock it over?
So Nick, what?
I didn't spill my coffee. Thank you. The bar is low.
I'm Nicholas Reed. I, for more than 15 years, was an agent at International Creative Management. I used to run the film department. And really, I guess, hopefully, I try to master how to sell something in 30 seconds. The way I look at it is if I have 30 seconds before you hang up on me. If I get you in the first 30 seconds, I've got 2 minutes. If I get to 2 minutes, I got 5 minutes. And if I get to 5 minutes, I can set a meeting. So I try very hard to encapsulate ideas into a very core delivery in order to try and not get hung up on. I left 3 years ago to pursue a bunch of things in the social media world because I just felt that, you know, in the old days, you had a phone number and you'd be sitting down for dinner and you'd get the phone call and it was the LA Times sending you a newspaper. You know, with the millennials, they're at college, they travel, they change jobs. It's like, you know, addresses and phone numbers keep moving. Suddenly the email was a thing you wanted. And now it's like if you can connect to someone on YouTube or on Snapchat and stuff like that. So I was just fascinated by the new world. I think all the platforms that exist are basically all niches that are created by people who are trying to do something different. So when you look at what it is you want to create, think about who your audience is, and then think about where do those people live or where are they going. So obviously Facebook was young, cool, and groovy. Now it's not. Mum and dad is on it, kids are off it. So they keep moving somewhere. I think the beauty of the new platforms is that they are short form, lower cost. You know, they're seen on mobile, which suddenly means you don't need even HD. Suddenly the cost of production comes way down. So suddenly you have an opportunity to get to people in a way that's cheaper, that's more targeted. But at the end of the day, you know, Hollywood hasn't changed at all, which is at the end of the day, you fall in love with a character, you fall in love with a story, and whether that's 3 minutes or 3 hours, whether that's in a movie theater or 24-hour binge watching of Game of Thrones, right? You're still connected to it because you are connected to the characters, the story, and the world. So that doesn't change. You know, the platform is purely a delivery system, and that affects the quality of production, maybe the length of it, and stuff like that. But as Charles says, I think today, you know, if you're a smart person and you go, I'm never going to get a bloody movie made, but I'm really talented, then, you know, if you go back to Robert Rodriguez, which I think was 20 years ago, here's a guy who just said, screw it. He went out, sold his own blood, raised $7,000, went and shot a film, finished it, went around Hollywood, and lo and behold, he became the Robert Rodriguez you know today. So I think really that, you know, determination and embracing new technology is all about getting noticed. And there are people on Vine who've got contracts who are making a living making Vines. So that to me is complete proof that you can create in any platform and anything. And if you have a great idea, at the end of the day, you can get discovered, which is obviously what it's all about at the end of the day.
Again, a show of hands, how many are in the creative space of creating content? Okay, raise your hands. How many are doing film, just out of curiosity? And how many are doing television? So it's sort of split there. And then how many are you have content on the internet? Anybody? So wow, that's a balance. So I wanted to ask them a little bit, you know, is there a good mix with regard to that? Like if you can do a good YouTube, does that naturally mean that you can do a film? Or, you know, do you suggest they focus in one area, you know, or try to do television, film, and digital?
I would say that the biggest problem in engaging the end user, I like to call them fansumers. I don't mean to be cute by it, but people consume content all day and people become fans of things. And so whether you're doing television, film, YouTube content, you know, solely gaming content, I think you have to be focused on probably two very important things. The platform for which you are producing has a unique set of shared experiences on connecting with that fansumer. So that basically I'm saying that stuff you make for YouTube is not going to work generally on most other platforms. However, it can be an extension of an overall story. So for National Treasure 3, you know, we used to, I think back in 2001, we did the first one. Well, it came out in 2004, and we were all talking about all the great new technologies coming out and how we should be interactive because it's a treasure hunt and all of these various things. And the reality was we couldn't deliver it. It was too much to think about. It was rapidly evolving. I used to call it rapidly devolving. But we used to take that story and say, okay, where can we have the most commercial success? And we believed it was a motion picture, and it actually ended up working, knock on wood. Now as we work on number 3, which is basically a decade later, we are thinking about every platform, from Vine to Instagram to YouTube to how we get social tribes together to talk about a great treasure hunt and deliver content uniquely made for each of those platforms, but around the shared experience of National Treasure. So again, I think the first rule I keep going back to is every platform has its own set of unique requirements to engage a customer. It doesn't mean you can't come up with, which is number 2, the overall story that can apply to all the other platforms. You're going to need to connect your story, your creative energy around a shared experience that you can get financed by stringing together all of those platforms. Not one of those platforms can live by itself in a financial model. And I know we're storytellers, but we also have to make money in doing it. And so Nick can talk about how he created an extraordinary documentary and delivered that for one medium, but he used all the other platforms to discover that piece of content and clipped out of that movie things that got people engaged about it. And that's what you have to think about when you're creating content. So film, television, don't look at them as silos. You're going to have to string them all together and provide unique pieces of content from your story to service it all.
Let me ask you before we move on to Nick. And
I was
Nick,
just going to ask Charles to keep talking about how great I was, actually.
Yes.
Does it change the way you look at the script? In other words, oh, well, suddenly there's an opportunity for a digital opportunity to blow out one of the characters, right? So is it sort of like a script on, turbocharge, right? You're trying to extract every element from it when before you just looked at it for film.
I would just say, the most obvious for me is, I probably in the movies, you'll see in each movie about 8 significant clues to find the prize at the end of the movie. I probably write and research 25 to 30 of them. And only 8 really make the movie. So what do you do with that other content? Well, that other content is perfect to exploit on the other platforms for a discovery mechanism to eventually find your way back and be excited about the overall story and hopefully go to the theaters and spend a significant amount of money on popcorn.
Maybe
Can I ask
tickets.
Charles a question on that? My concern about that is when you work in a mass system like a studio, you have all these fiefdoms within it, and that word synergy that everyone talks about how great it would be doesn't exist in practice. And obviously, in your case of the film is the big potato, everyone's on that. So everything else is supporting it. So you can have these amazing ideas, and obviously like the, Wachowski's tried it with The Matrix, and there are other people who've been trying it, but it strikes me that those other mediums, getting them all work together is a tricky thing. So you have all these amazing ideas. How easy are you finding it in the system to actually bring them?
I would say it's impossible generally because most corporations want to own all of it. But I would say there are unique concepts around movies that companies will say that particular content is not in our wheelhouse, and they'll give it back to some of the producers and some of the creators to go exploit elsewhere. They'll still take ownership in it, obviously, but it's getting a bit easier. I would say 3-4 years ago, pretty impossible. But with the likes of DWA investing in Awesomeness TV all the way up to Disney, who's bought Maker, I think the idea of short form content is being celebrated, and it's just a matter of time that you're going to see those sort of short form creators start to usurp some of the biggest brands and IP that we know. Machinima is a great example. I consult with Machinima. We now have Machinima has the rights with Warner Brothers to take 5 superheroes and put them in alternative worlds, and for Warner Brothers to just give that up is pretty extraordinary. However, they trust the community of Machinima as a core fan base. So if you can ignite that core fan base, it breathes more life into the IP.
Yeah, and I want to continue to writers, because a lot of times I think one of the challenges that you have 25 ideas and you want to stick all 25 in the film because they're almost like your babies, right? And so maybe was it hard to pick those 8 out of 25? And it was kind of nice to know you could still retain those ideas and then leverage them in a different way, right? Is that?
Yeah, no, I wish I could say I was in the choice. Pretty much, you overwrite, as a script, and then a lot ends up on the floor that you wish wasn't there. But again, it's not being put in a waste paper basket now. It's actually slowly but surely being exploited in a positive way across other platforms.
So Nick, tell us about Lady in Number 6. How did that come about? Did you feel that was a documentary from the get-go? Were you thinking?
So I've been an agent for many years, and I decided I want to be a bit more creative and a bit better for my soul. And I decided to do a documentary, and I was lucky enough to represent a very good documentary filmmaker. And I just come out of the Academy Awards 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now. And I just called him up and said, look, I need to do a documentary. I want to do something for my soul. And he said, I've just met this woman. I can't believe you just called me. And he explained about this. I think at the time she was a mere 106, I think at the time. And he told me this story about this woman who had survived the Holocaust, was 106 years old, was a classical pianist who lived alone on her own in London in this flat, and told me a little bit about her life. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. Let's do it. I took the point of view that a 30, 40-minute documentary would be amazing, and a 2-hour documentary would be not so amazing. You know, sometimes you have enough material, and I think that's one of the big things as creators. You have to figure out, like, what is the sweet spot and what is the strength of the story. So going into it, I knew it was going to be that. But as I started the journey, I found these other 3 amazing women who had shared experiences, and on a documentary, the story kind of develops as you go down the journey. The thing that really got me interested in the social space was that when I finished it, everyone told me, you've never produced a movie before, you're not Jewish, you don't play the piano, your guitar playing is really shit, and she's an old woman. And, you know, having been a guy who sold stories for 20 years, I'm like, no, you're wrong. And I had just the complete courage of my conviction. And then I went around and started meeting people, and I started meeting people in the YouTube space and the Twitter space. It's how I got to meet Winston. I met Charles at YouTube Nation, and suddenly I saw this whole new universe. And what was fascinating about it was this new universe allowed you to build a community. Well, there are a community on Facebook of over 50-year-old people that wanted to do the movie. But when I started the film, the one thing that I decided I wanted to make was I didn't want to make a Holocaust movie. So I tried to figure out, what is my core story, and make sure everything stays on that core story. And to me, the core story, that, because I think she's someone that everyone should know, is if you watch this film, you will live longer and happier. And to me, that touches everyone's life, right? Now, within the film, there will be different aspects that it will appeal to, but the core story is really about this woman just figured out a way how in her brain could just process the world, that she could reduce stress and keep herself in a place of happiness, which by definition makes you live longer. And that kind of blew me away. And then I started to work with Mark Carlson at Relish Mix, who basically does a lot of social data insights. And I started to realize that I could reach out to my community. And as Charles said, I cut a trailer, which I had to cut. And then what happened was I cut an 11-minute piece of my 40-minute film. And that became a viral piece of video. So it was like an 11-minute, it showed you enough about this woman that it made you went, oh my God, I have to see the rest of the film. I cut the film into like 20 pieces. She had these amazing little tags, you know, like, you know, even in the bad, there is good. So, you know, my YouTube channel, by the time it finished, had about 40 different videos. And then I had 20 interviews of people who'd seen the film, who were, you know, choked up, who were crying. So it kind of gave you real third-party validation that the film was great. And then when I put my community together, you know, with my content, suddenly I had this awareness. And I think, to me, one of the most amazing things I remember is I had been lucky enough to be nominated for the film. I was arriving from Seattle. I was picked up at the airport by a 55-year-old Arab gentleman in a taxi. I was on the phone talking about how excited I was about the nomination. I put the phone down. He said, I'm sorry to interrupt. I couldn't help but hearing, did you produce that movie about the really old lady who plays the piano, whose son plays the cello? I went, yeah. And he said, oh, it's amazing. I said, well, how do you know about it? He goes, I saw it on YouTube. So again, it just points that this social media is all about getting attention, being discovered, right? And then bringing that person back. You've only got to look at the fight going on with Jimmy Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel. They're fighting on YouTube, right, to get the most subscribers, the most views, because what's happening is they're being discovered on YouTube, and then people are going from online to offline to actually watch the TV show. So everything is becoming more and more woven together.
Great. I want to touch upon concept, because we're heading into one area there, and it'll relate to what you're just talking about, which is concept lies in the obvious, right? Everything's obvious. If you look around the room, everything is obvious, right? Oh, that's a chair, that's a table. Your mind doesn't stop and analyze what that chair is. It doesn't analyze what the light is. You know, it assumes it. So we're used to things that are obvious. We throw them back. It's a fast way to do it. And so part of this work that we did is analyze what a fan is. Like, how many people know what a fan is? Music fan, right? Well, guess what? It's changed structurally, conceptually. It's completely different than it was in the 60s. In the 60s, what you had was a guy or a girl driving their Chevy down the road. They turn on the radio, they hear a monkey song, and they go, oh my God, I gotta have that. They'd stop into a store, They'd pay for that record and virtually disappear as far as the labels were concerned, right? Virtually disappear. That was sort of the definition of a fan. And we were modeling that for Interscope Records because fan has changed, and it's changed for music and it's changed for film, right? Film, they are digital assets too. They're the guys, perhaps different levels we were creating, saying there's one fan who recognizes the music. There's another fan who follows the band. There's another layer of fan who actually promotes the band. And that is key. And so suddenly you're starting to see all these businesses created around people who promote things. And I think you'll see that obviously in film. But how do we look at fans now? Is it like, is there a magic number that you get on YouTube that suddenly says, oh my gosh, now I can take it to Hollywood? Or is it just a mixture of things? Do we?
I think the bigger thing is, and Charles and I actually debate this quite a lot, which is the number is a nice thing, but really it's the engagement. In this day and age of fake and real, and to your point of the guy that likes the band, buys the music, goes to the concert, but then actually tells everyone how great they are and you've got to love them, it's kind of the same in the YouTube world too, I think. So I think the bigger issue is engagement. I mean, clearly, there are a lot of YouTubers right now who have 3-4 million subscribers, and no surprise, they're getting deals. They're getting deals to be hosts on shows. They're being invited onto TV stuff. Where the question the traditional media guys always ask me is, well, how do you know if it's real? We did this thing with One Direction for this product. We had 40 million tweets, and no one could give a shit about our shampoo. So how do you connect supposedly the social reach that you have with moving the needle? And I think, again, it comes down to engagement. And when numbers are 3-4 million, then for a TV show, I think someone would take a meeting with them. But it's not quite there yet, I don't think.
I would say that, when I talk to companies, they get surprised because they want to redefine what a fan is. I don't think fans have changed since the beginning of time. I just think the platforms and technology have made it frictionless between a fan and the people that they follow. And it amazes me how record companies get surprised by that. You can charge them a lot of money when you say things like that because they're surprised by, it's master the obvious, right? If you love U2 and you want to buy U2 music, I don't want to get in my car and have to drive somewhere and park, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can just get it here. And now, as of a few months ago or last month, I got it here automatically. Now, there was a big uproar about that, and we don't have to get into that. But to me, it's just a frictionless connection between a fan and what they love is exactly the nirvana for every future business. I believe that can be built around content. There are people I could name right now that nobody in this room will have heard of, but literally can lock down Times Square in New York like we did 4 months ago and Brian Robbins did with Awesomeness TV, and a talent, I swear to you, he doesn't sing, he doesn't dance, it's not all that funny. But he got 7,000 people to show up at GMA because he thought he was booked on the television show and found out he was booked on the web streaming version of GMA, and put a call out to his fan base, and they had 7,000 people show up in 22 minutes. 22 minutes.
This community thing comes back to when you pitch an idea, right? And if you're not a produced artist, the big problem is that this whole town, we all bitch about it. It happens, right? I walk in with an idea. Someone says, that idea is shit. I walk in with the same idea with Ben Stiller. They go, I love that idea, right? So this community building is basically kind of proof of concept, right? People who are buyers are scared, right? So if you walk in the door, was it last week, Wattpad, the way you can post your books and stories, Paramount bought a book because she had like 1 billion page reads, right? Well, she's basically saying, I have an audience, right? So when you walk in the door and say, I have 1 million people on Vine or whatever it is, what you're saying is, look, I am actually pretty good about this, and here is an objective fact. I have 1 million followers. That's objectivity, right? Subjectivity is whether they like the idea or not, but you can come in the door and say, whether you get me being funny or not, a million people think I am funny, so therefore I am funny.
So Charles, in some ways, are you saying it's also just structurally how you reach your fan? That's probably the bigger challenge, or creating content?
No,
that
I think it's
connects to-
discovery. I mean, I have no doubt in this room there's some extraordinary creators and storytellers. The problem is there's 5,000 new apps every month that are basically created or recycled just for the kids and family space. And then multiply that by every air and water category, from food to cars to just go down the list. And so discovery of your content is always the most difficult, I believe, process. And that's why you have to pick not just one platform. You have to find the platform that will give you the money that you can afford to make the content. But it's all the shoulder, like I call it shoulder content, around that shared experience that you've created for that first platform that you need to spread around those other platforms to get discovery of the original. I know that was does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And if you try to separate those or leave it to the very platform that you sold the original content to, you're pretty much doomed for failure, because by definition, those sort of protectionists, I would say that when you sell a piece of content, generally a company writing the biggest check wants most of the ownership, and they want to control the marketing and promotion. What they can't control is the social media around it. They may even be able to say to you as a creator, you can't even take a clip of your own show that you've created and place it into social media. But it doesn't mean they can shut the dialogue up on Twitter, on Facebook, the blogging. And so it's very important to really engage the communities that you have grown as creators in your past. And it can start with one in your community, and it'll quickly become two. And you've got to force that marketing and promotion, as long as it's authentic and trustworthy. If you make bad content and you know it's bad and you try to sell it as good, you're going to get eaten alive. I've made some really bad stuff, and I know when I'm making bad stuff. They tell me when I'm making bad stuff, and I don't try to defend it. And the second you try to defend it is when you lose that authenticity and trustworthy that you've built for a long, long time.
I think last time when we had a panel, you talked a little bit about Katzenberg's sort of vision of the future. Instead of one movie going to 100,000, one movie goes to 1 billion fans.
I keep forgetting that quote. He says it a lot, and I keep forgetting it. But it's generally, one thing that has always impressed me about Jeffrey, and this doesn't have to be a love letter certainly to him, but he never fears failure. And he never fears putting up his own money. And it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. The fact is, it's what Nick has did with his movie, right? He put up some of his own money and knew the story he wanted to tell and how to tell it. And I would say that the one thing that got me excited about DreamWorks Animation and that got me back to that company was how Jeffrey talked about there will probably in his lifetime for sure, you're not going to pay $14 to see Shrek. It's not going to be 397,000 people paying $14. It's going to be 1 billion people paying 3 cents. And that is where it is going. Content, not in a negative way, is going to be a commodity in that first window, is the best way to say it. And that's what's exciting about most of the media companies. They're always slow to move, but they are in a panic on the disruptive platforms and how people can so quickly discover their content, consume it, and then throw it away. And it is the massive amount of marketing it takes to get people. I mean, take the oldest business in the world, which is motion pictures. Some of you want to be in the movie business. The idea of spending 40% of your production budget to market the movie. And when that person goes and in best case has a great experience at that movie, you still don't know who that customer is. It's fundamental. Like, you would get fired in any product, good or service company if a customer came into Target and bought something and you didn't know who they were. Well, that's been the motion picture business. We have created fans around some of the greatest movie franchises in the world, and we can't even tell if they're a man or a woman. We don't know their age. We know nothing about them. Yet, we turn around and make another one of those movies and start from scratch again with 40% of the budget to try to. So what you end up doing is this whole fansumer experience and ecosystem is trying to capture the customer and keeping them alive to your IP and brand between the offerings of that IP, whether it's in movies or on YouTube or whatever content you're going to put out. And that is the big promise of these new emerging platforms, and certainly the most established online platforms now.
And I want to throw it open to questions in just a couple of minutes, but I want to ask, in terms of you selecting content, Nick, how much effort are you looking at the fan, or is it more what you love, or looking at the platform? Like, how do you?
Well, there's two questions there. One is, I may or may not have liked the book Twilight, but when you sell, 20 million copies, I love it. The problem being an artist is that you are an artist who needs a business partner, right? And people look for that in managers and agents and lawyers, because these are things that maybe you don't want to go do, because by definition, you live in your head and you create these worlds. I think for me, I make content in two arenas. I make the ones that really touch me, right? Whether that's a documentary or a popcorn movie, right? But National Treasure is a big event movie, but at its core, there was something that really Charles connected with. That's what made him go on that journey. The trick is how do you make, Indiana Jones, right? That's an action movie. And, some of the diehards, you could say also, there was that thing, you just love Bruce Willis's character, you went on that story, right? And the trick is, how do you turn popcorn? But at its root, you still have to want to go on the journey with your character, right? You still want to be engaged in that relationship. So I think that for me, I work in both worlds. But the big comment that we use a lot at my company is the word selfish, right? In order to get someone's time, they are meeting you for a selfish reason. So if you're a film writer and you have a meeting with an executive, right? If it's a favor, then you're in trouble. You've got 3 minutes to turn it into a meeting. But in reality, that executive is meeting you because selfishly, they hope that you are bringing them something that is great. Because if you do, it will make them look great, okay? Your fansumer, as Charles calls it, you have a 3-minute video on YouTube that goes up every week. People are selfish. Why am I going to spend 3 minutes to watch even assuming I found it, why am I going to watch it? Well, you have to give me something, right? You have to give me heart. You have to make me laugh. You have to get me hooked on your character, and I will come back. But if you don't ultimately if you don't think really to the bottom degree, which is selfishness, don't tell me that it's fine, Nick, the movie's really boring, but at the end it's great. I'm not there anymore, right? My time is important. Everyone's time is important. And the thing about kids on YouTube, I guess the 3.5 minute video clip tends to be kind of the average right now on most YouTubers. It's for a reason. 3-4 minutes, I can watch that. I can totally digest it. It doesn't ruin my day. And if you give me fun in that experience, I'll check it out next week. So I think selfishness. Why does anybody care about your story or what it is you're doing?
I mean, I'll add right now, as we're talking, I'm sure people are looking at their email. They're on a second. No, right? There's a second screen experience going on here. Some are thinking about other things, right? And that's what happens when you try to engage a fansumer. Your entire job of creating content is trying to find a great shared experience that will drive people from stopping this. I watched True Detective for the first time. I binged on it. I literally had all the episodes. I think it was 13 episodes or 12 episodes. I can't remember, but I just literally watched it straight over 2 days. And I never looked at my email one time.
I know I sent you one and I didn't hear it.
There you go. And that's the nirvana of a creator, right? Is to figure out how you can just capture somebody and not let them go. But what we're competing with all of these devices as we're looking at other devices. And Oh, thank you. That's good. That's good salesmanship. I appreciate that. The one thing I always say, where I think companies and as creators, I would rather have 10,000 fully engaged fansumers of my content than 1 million semi-engaged, because I can transact 10,000 people who are passionate about a story, are passionate about a piece of content. You know, there is this need for size. You know, it goes back to the millennia about we just want to grow, 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 grow. The reality is unbelievably successful companies, Scripps Networks, Buy the Stock, Food Network, HGTV, a 125-year-old news company went from a newspaper business to one of the most powerful cable service programmers today. And the reason they did that was, you know, they didn't want to reach a 3.5 Nielsen rating in cable. They just wanted a 1.0 of food lovers. And then they took those food lovers and they learned about those food lovers and they listened. They created a feedback loop with the new online technologies to sell them food and pots and pans and recipes. And they connected those fans with what they love. And it is a $10 billion cap company for that reason, not because of how large they wanted to grow it. For every producer and content creator in here, you got to engage your community and you can never let them go, even sacrificing the next 10 people. You got to keep the ones that love you. That is critical.
What's interesting, if you remember CBS, right? Their demographics were shooting higher than anyone else's, you know, a long time ago. And Les Moonves was saying, I just want loyal fans. So while everyone was trying to get younger and younger, he stayed with this really strong, you know, a little bit older demographics that just loved his show. And that became a powerhouse for them. CSI, all those things, that model kind of, and it speaks to what.
Just to be clear, Les tried to cancel all those shows when he first came to CBS, which is the lesson. You know, I'll probably be in a river by, you know, in a week. But I was there when Les took over and said, we got to get rid of all this old shit. Right? And as soon as he got rid of some of the old shit.
He's a genius.
No, but it's knowing your demographic, right? It's playing on your strengths. His genius was changing that course within 16 weeks. He was smart enough to say, my knee-jerk reaction is to fix this by going younger. And he was even smarter to say, I can't go younger that fast. I need loyal audience. And he completely 100% reversed his strategy, which has led to, you know, an incredible powerhouse. And it takes a no-fear operator or a no-fear creator to change your strategy based on the feedback loop. I mean, if people came up to me and said, I hate National Treasure, and I get them, believe me, I get them every day. I'm sure there's a couple in the room. There's a point where, as a creator, you got to listen. You got to listen. People have good ideas. You're taking their money, and more importantly, you're taking their time. Life is short, and you want to make sure that you can feed them what they are interested, as long as you're excited about it. If you're not excited about making that kind of content, don't. You know, no upside. You'll torture yourself, literally.
Because one thing I just want to add on to that, which Charles mentioned, which I want to just double down on, is the beauty of today is niche, right? So if you have a Quentin Tarantino-esque, you know, ninja assassin chef, right? And she's very much embedded in the world of culinary skills and restaurants, right? You can actually go onto the web and you can find the most influential vlogs, websites, which talk about food, fun, and stuff like that. And if you happen to talk to the editor and say, hey, I've got this new show, she's this amazing chef and mother, but at nighttime she's this ninja assassin, right? You suddenly have access to these 10 million people that love food. So the wonderful thing about niche is you can know where they are. The problem that the studio has is they want everything. Now, everything is tricky, right? But if you want to get a guy, you know, a guy that plays video games, Mishimina is a place where you know by definition that anyone in that world is pretty much probably turning up to your movie. So the thing about niche is that if you're sci-fi, whatever it is, there are communities that exist, right? So you instantaneously have feedback from people that say, oh my God, I love your chef idea, or it's shit. But you suddenly have eyeballs of people that actually will give you that first 30 seconds, maybe that 2 minutes, to tell you whether or not it's good or not. And if it's good, well, you're in business.
Great, great, great. So I want to throw it out to questions now. Somebody had a question? Yes, please.
I'm curious, like back, 10, 15 years ago, it was the project would go, the film would be filmed, and then the marketing department would be brought in to figure out how to really broadcast or market the film properly. But now, like, do you look at each script or project that you're potentially interested in from a marketing standpoint and break it down like for the different avenues or platforms that it can be marketed before putting this into production or deciding that it's something that they're interested in?
I think that's really a studio. I see the problem is that, so producer, even as brilliant and as amazing and fantastic and powerful as Charles, right?
Wow.
Disney is still writing the check for $100 million+. So Charles can go in and say, hey, I've got a great script and I've got this huge, fantastic campaign. And they say, hang on, I don't give a shit about the campaign, Charles. Do I want to make the movie? Right? So in a film scenario, it's still about the script. And in reality, it's really not about the script. It's about, can the script attach the elements in addition that make the studio go, yes. Then when they go, yes, they go, Charles, we want to do all those things. And he goes, we're in production already. Right? So now he's scrambling, trying to put some of those pieces together. So the problem is that the film journey is pretty imperfect.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I mean, it's complicated. Every studio is different. I will say it is your job as a creator and a producer to get a yes, right? And if a great app company will tell you the best way to get people to sign up for their app is not to get them to sign up, right? It's just frictionless. There it is. So for movies, I sort of liken it to building a great app, which is you want to give them every reason to say yes. Ben Stiller's attached. There's 1 million subscribers. Out of that 1,999,000 are engaged. And they've all told me in an email, and here they are in my binder, that they're all going to spend $14 to come see it, right? So they need a reason to say yes, because their entire job, I'm not being cynical here, embrace it, use it as judo. The entire energy and infrastructure of most traditional media companies is to say no. And there's a pyramid, and there's one guy or girl who generally could say yes 5 years ago. Now there's a green light committee, and that green light committee is made up of the studio chief, the second studio chief, because he needs a second studio chief to fire when the movie doesn't work out. Now, guys, I'm dead serious. It makes me laugh when I hear it too, but I'm just dead serious. Like, I never walk into a room unless I know who's in the room. And I am telling you, the green light committee, and then you have the head of marketing.
Who gets fired too.
Who gets fired too, because the head of development will say, well, it was marketing's problem. We've read these articles. We've heard these stories. Our job as producers is to tap into, first and foremost, a great shared experience story. Something that just, they feel like I have more studio, I'm not kidding you, studio people still say to me, I loved the National Treasure book. It's never a book. I was on vacation with my wife. I wrote a 25-page treatment, but apparently there was a book they loved. So I can be an idiot and say it wasn't a book, dumbass. I just go, great, I'm glad. Because but it's unique, and by the way, it's unique to that story, right? We feel like we want, that's a great shared experience at the time. And there's hundreds and hundreds of those great shared experiences. You just got to make it easy for them to say a yes.
Cool. Yes, please.
We discussed social media content, platforms, YouTube, etc. As a producer, what do you feel about creative individuals that are also actors, basically going after a project that's in pre-production and demonstrating their original content on the social media platforms? Would you feel challenged, or how would you feel about that?
I didn't quite get the question myself.
Well, basically, it's an audition on one of the social platforms for a concept and
No,
talent.
it's a production of a project that's a production done by a different company. And you're basically targeting a niche to be a part of that production when casting or whatever company.
I don't quite understand the question, but that's me, not you. Trust me. I would say this, that if you have a great feedback loop with your ideas, and I have a cabal of friends that I always sit and pitch my ideas to, and it's turned into a drinking game. And what I have learned is that a great Twitter account, used smartly, can be one of the greatest feedbacks. I mean, if my Twitter account's really bad, but it's good at one thing. And because I put a lot of not so interesting things out, but people bear with it. But you'll see every 10 days, I test a clue for National Treasure. I test a chef that I will put on Iron Chef. And how I do that is I find an interesting piece of history and let people tell me about it. Right. And I realize by dialogue in that community that that is a story element I want to use. You know, it's hard to say that those folks are steering the idea or steering the concept, but I will tell you I'm getting feedback certainly with the narrative that I am thinking about in a piece of content from that community before I even introduce it right back to that community. If that's sort of what you were asking conceptually.
Yeah, the beauty of being a creative is that go tell 10 people that are not your friends a story, and if they go, it sucks, you've got a problem, right? That's either your presentation or it's your story. If you're an actor and you're going for a role, get 10 people you don't know, email them the clip from the show or whatever, and if they come back and say, hey, I liked the beginning, but I didn't get the ending, right? The great thing about social media is the feedback loop, right? I have a friend of mine who's in the Guinness Book of Records for raising the most amount of money to do a video game. It's called Star Citizen. And what they love is they don't spend 3 years in a dark room and release the game and then people go, I don't like that, right? They're releasing stuff and the fans are saying, hey, this doesn't really work for me, this is why, and they're able to change it. And I think the feedback loop actually is probably one of the best things that has still not being used properly today, but never existed 20 years ago, that allows you to take your idea and make it better before you actually go to the meeting where the guy says, I love it or I hate it.
Right. A young director I knew, he put together, called in all these favors to put in a huge but short piece with special effects and visual effects. And he put it on YouTube and suddenly was signed by CAA off of that. So that's rare, but the quality was there, storytelling was there. So that feedback was in the quality that you produce. So obviously part of your world is to know other people in the business, right? Because a friend of yours or people that you network with may help you 3 years down the line because they have this great talent in terms of photography, right? Or being a DP, obviously, or director or acting, all those pieces, as Charles was saying, you know, you're creating great content and getting some feedback on it really, really makes a difference. Okay. Yes, sorry.
With all that in mind, are people still buying pitches for online content, or do they expect, you know, creatives to make some part of it themselves and throw it up there?
I would say both. You know, people tell me every day you can't go in and sell a movie pitch, and you know, I sell 3 or 4 a year. Other times in online, you know, I would say that you can control your IP better if you make something of it. You know, reality television has changed the world in pitches, right? You used to come in and say, hey, I got this great idea about 5 people on an island and they got to survive. Now you have to go in with an entire presentation tape and actually take 5 people and kill them on the island and show the executive, this is the show you want to buy, right? Because here it is. And I think it's in between those 2 points, pending on other elements. So it's hard to say yes or no to any of that other than think about the getting a yes, think about who you're talking to, and what boxes do you think you need to check to prove that getting that no is a bad idea out of their mouth, that it could go elsewhere.
I think to me, it's basically, to add to that, it's about how successful you are. Charles does something which is incredibly difficult because he has a track record. So if you come in the room and you pitch me an idea and I've seen your last 5 jobs and I love them, I'm probably going to buy it. If you come in the room and pitch me an idea and I don't know who you are, I don't know what you do, I don't know how many days that last video shot, probably not so much. You know, so it's like anything. People make it easy for people, right? If they don't know you, you're not produced, then you got to go figure out a way to do it.
So Charles, you mentioned less to invest and
I didn't say anything about less windows. I don't know what you're talking about.
both being fearless. So is fearlessness, does fearlessness evolve over a career, or do you-
Well, you know, when you have your own jet, it's easy to be fearless, right? I mean, let's get cynical about this. We're trying to pay rent, right? It's hard to be fearless if you're trying to pay bills. But I would say that, you know, there is nothing worse for me than writing. Like I hate it. Like it's lonely, it's shitty. You look at a blank page, it's terrible. And I don't like doing it. And I have made it a point to try to enjoy what I am doing. I am not independently wealthy, but I say no to a lot of stuff because I just can't bear to be alone with something that I'm not interested in doing. And so I don't want to say that's fearless. I will just say that I just can't do my best work if I don't enjoy what I am doing. And that's why I have multiple jobs. You know, you got to do a lot of things to pay the bills. There's nothing better than having a job that can pay the rent, but in a very disciplined manner, carving out time to create the thing you love and going out and selling it. And I think that's how you build a foundation of doing what you love. And you will quickly learn, and I have quickly learned, and I learn every day, that the second I attach myself to something or try to move something forward that at the end of the day I don't just fundamentally believe in, it doesn't mean it's going to work by any stretch of the imagination. Like I said, I have discovered I have done really bad stuff. But as soon as I get in that process, I have no fear at abandoning it. I have no fear of saying, you know what, I can't continue doing this. I'm not good at it. The product is bad and I got to move on. And usually you get fired, right? So long-winded story, maybe fearlessness is the wrong word, but it is the cliche of you've got to, the best writing, you know, I'm rambling, but you know, when I worked with Steven Spielberg at DreamWorks Television, that guy, you just knew when he loved an idea, and you just knew when he pitches like a 10-year-old. He just gets in there and tells you a story like no other person can tell you a story because he loves it. He loves storytelling. That's the secret. What's amazing to me is there's Steven Spielberg's in this room right here. That you can go make something and put it on YouTube. We've got this show, YouTube Nation, that tries to find content that you might not necessarily discover on YouTube, right? Because you come into it 1,000 different ways. The stuff that we curate and find is stunningly good. Like just amazingly interesting in storytelling. And the idea that somebody can take the time out of whatever day they have from someplace in the world and make that and put that up is fantastic. But what they get is they're engaging their community. You watch them work that comment board. They are building an audience, and you're going to see people rise out of that and then just cross a number of different platforms with that content with an army of community behind them. So that's the fun.
Yes, in the back. Oh, sorry.
You got an applause there. That was good.
That was good.
I got one. Thank you.
Yes, yes, you. Sorry.
That's my wife over there. Thank you. I'm just kidding.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, what I found is, first of all, structure, ideas and concepts are two different things, just to sort of give you a background with that. Theme is different than concept. Concept has to do with essence, but most people today, they blend those two together. And the places where it's having an impact is on tentpole films. You know, is that I started to do analysis on those and breaking down the essence of a deeper layer underneath films. So with films, to capture story, plot, character, you have a script. But to capture what all that's based on, there are hundreds of concepts underneath the film. I do these 150-page concept models that lock down every concept in the film. So one of the best examples is, I'll give you one that's a bad example and then one that's a great example, but Lone Ranger, you know, they had the best producers there, the best writers. They're very, very talented on story, structure, character. They've been trained in all those things. From a marketing point of view, that film makes a lot of sense to make that. You know, it was a good decision on Disney's part, and finance, it makes sense. But that's what was it, $180 million film, which didn't have the core concept of the Lone Ranger in it. So in my discussions with them, I really put it this way. The farthest thing from a Lone Ranger is a pirate. You see, and so now you see the genius of selling that would say, let's do Pirates of the Caribbean as a Western, in essence, whether they said it directly or not. And wouldn't you, as the head of the studio, want that business to have another billion-dollar franchise? But you see, what I do separately is I deconstruct the concept of Lone Ranger. And concepts are infinite. Stories are limited. Concepts are infinite. So the concept underneath the Lone Ranger, you know, first of all, the best example is the mask, right? How does the mask work? When you're a kid and you put on that mask, all this courage can come out of you. I feel like the Lone Ranger, but in this film, they just played around with the mask. You know, you saw it. You saw the Lone Ranger without the mask. You can't do that if you're going to follow the concept of Lone Ranger, which is separate from story. And again, the reason why that works is because Lone Ranger has that intuitive, bring out the courage that is hidden there, and kids can relate to that. You can't change that model, right? But they played around with that because you're trying to update it. So some things you can change, some things you can't. When I model these things, then you can lock them down so everyone's on the same page. It's opposite from brainstorming, because we can all have ideas of the different colors of the car or where the story should go. But if you're talking about the Lone Ranger or Superman, Superman must fly. On the good side, the movie I always talk about is Shawshank Redemption. How many of you have seen that film? How many of you love that film? What? How many of you have been in prison and escaped? Anybody? Well, you know, and there he is. Yeah, thanks. But then why do we relate to that? And let me show you, story is you're in prison, you get out. That's the story. And you remember when we talk around Hollywood, we say, well, there are 27 stories, right? Guy meets girl, girl meets guy, they fight, and they get back together. The whole reason that film is one of the best of all time is a layer of concept underneath it. And by the way, every great film, I'm not in the business to do a good film, I'm in the business to get perfection. That layer is hope. And that's not a theme. A theme is the adjective of hope. But how do you talk about hope? Let's concept hope. One of the cool things about hope is that you talk about it in its absence, right? So that's why prison is a perfect place to do an essay on hope. Every character relates to hope. One is losing hope. One has lost hope. That's the librarian. Do you all remember the librarian? Why do you remember a secondary character? Because he leaves prison and still commits suicide because he lacks hope. Now you have another character who has hope, who's just gotten it back and it's cut off. And that's the young boy that they were trying to train, right? Pass his grades. And then you have our main character, who is the essence of somebody with real hope. So my modeling actually impacts production, because when you look at that 4-foot wall, right? You remember that? They take their time because what it's really saying intuitively is how much hope he had to have to dig just a little inch every day. So all those things are not related to story. They're related to the concept of what Shawshank is really about. Godfather, if you want me to continue, I'll just give you this one example because I have hundreds, but I always win $1,000 bet in Hollywood. I don't know if you read my article on this.
Wait, hang on. 1,000,
Oh,
2,000, 3,000,
Yeah,
4,000.
I always win this bet because I ask people, do you know what the core concept of The Godfather is? And of course they must know, everyone in Hollywood study that, but really I always win this bet. And watch the structure. I'm not telling you about the story yet, but it's all influenced by this much deeper layer that takes about 6 weeks to actually model this stuff. So think about it. There was James Cagney, right? Jim Cagney. They used to do gangster movies. So now what's different about this? Well, this was a gangster movie, right? But taken to the new concept of what a gangster was mafia. What is the concept of mafia? Mafia is a gangster organization structured like a family. So when you lead to the next layer, you say, oh, that must be a movie about the mafia or how the mafia is like a family. And that is not the concept of the movie. And think about it, there have been 100 gangster movies after that, and they've all paled in comparison to that. The real concept, what makes it work, and then your eyes open and it becomes obvious, just like the iPhone is now obvious compared to this. It's obvious. Of course, that's where it's going to go, is what I call a varicept. It's like North Pole versus magnetic pole. It's just a shade off. And that's why I do these models, because if you don't get it right, but I mean perfectly, like a golf shot, it goes into the water. So the concept you think is mafia as family. The real concept is how mafia is not like a family. Now watch that movie again. The arc is driven by that. The emotion is driven by that. It sucks you in. Oh my God, this wedding? These guys are gangsters? They're like a family. And so he pulls you in. Michael starts to get to the top, but then suddenly Michael's there and he starts divorcing his wife, killing his brother-in-law, and he goes all the way to that one moment where you probably remember he's in the den. Now, you've seen 1 trillion movies. Why would you remember him standing in the den? Because it captures the essence of what The Godfather is, which is the reverse of the prodigal son story. The story itself has a concept. And at that moment, you're seeing him unlike any family, that he's seeing his brother get killed. And that's the essence. So now you, as writers, see the drama. My God, see it again. The arc of those two films is perfection in terms of showing you family, showing you not, and that creates tension in every scene. So when we deconstruct this, I go layers and layers to find out the essence of what hope is. It's an abstract thought. It's an abstract idea. But if you don't have mastery of that, then you're building story structure on guessing, on intuition. Their intuition with the Lone Ranger was, let's make this Pirates of the Caribbean as a Western. I'm sure you can kind of see that. That's why Johnny Depp has the makeup he does. But you didn't understand that the concept of the Lone Ranger is opposite that. It's like having Superman not fly. You can write it creatively, you can create story, but then it's not Superman. So my job is to do that. My job is to deconstruct this whole layer. But it's new because, I'm dealing with super talented writers and super talented directors, and they have tremendous gut and intuition. And so here I am coming to just analyze it, but all I'm doing is helping them to take it to the next level, to perfect their idea. We want perfection, and that's what Hope is, that's what Shawshank is, and The Godfather's like that. Sorry, I went on too long, but that's kind of what we do. So I think we're out of time. Can we just 2 seconds? Is there any last advice you give to them? Because I think what we were hearing was, don't be afraid, but get feedback, right?
As the more businessy guy than the creative guy, I would say you've got to figure out how to hook your idea, someone about your idea in, let's call it 60 seconds. Because if you can get someone hooked now you've got them and you can go the rest of the way. But if you just try and go out with your 5-minute pitch, it's going to be very tough.
I would just say get the feedback loop. There's no better loop in technology out there than real people discovering bits and pieces of your story. They don't know how you're going to put it all together, but get the feedback loop before you dive full blown in.
And I'll say, just to top it off, all of you who are here, it's the real truth is you're already successful coming out here to do something that you have great passion for. There are people on the other side of the country that didn't have the courage to come out here and fight this battle, and that's, the object of climbing Mount Everest is not the top of the mountain. That's just your destination. Otherwise, you could take a helicopter there. It's in the climbing. It's in the people you meet, the networking, kind of those wins that you get, kind of how you support and encourage each other. And being here tells us all that you're really dedicated to that. And just as Charles said, fearless. Let's win. Let's go out there.
Good job.
Good wrap up.